The first ripple of alarm spread across the cosmos like an electric pulse, subtle yet unmistakable. From our orbital vantage points, we watched the humans, tiny, fragile, unremarkable, yet the heavens themselves shivered as they were about to be tested. Then they came, fleets beyond imagination, enormous metallic forms slicing through the black, vast enough to blot out whole continents with their shadows. Weapons arrays gleamed like frozen fire, pulsars of energy ready to incinerate. Every vessel moved with deadly precision, not in the chaotic scatter of a panicked species, but in a choreography that suggested centuries of rehearsed mastery. On every world we observed, the equivalent of governments erupted in panic. Alarm sirens, flashing lights, and frantic communications scrambled across the galactic channels. Every sentient species that had once looked down on Earth trembled as the humans did nothing. Nothing. Their cities remained silent under the orbital storm. Their command centers blinked only the calm rhythm of life uninterrupted. Even from orbit we could see their soldiers, small, barely noticeable, yet aligned in perfect formation, anticipating actions that had not yet occurred. The first skirmishes began quietly. We thought them mere tests. Alien drones deployed to probe the human defenses were shredded within moments. Missiles designed to obliterate cities were intercepted by nothing more than simple kinetic deflectors, but deployed with timing and angles that suggested intuition rather than technology. Our sensors, calibrated for the most sophisticated war tactics across dozens of civilizations, struggled to interpret the patterns. Each human strike seemed random, yet every movement served a purpose beyond comprehension. From my vantage, I saw a single human mech unit dart between the wreckage of an intercepted vessel. Its movements were fluid, almost playful yet lethal. It anticipated the trajectory of alien weapons, always moving where we would not expect. And then, the twist. The humans did not pursue. They struck just enough to neutralize, just enough to teach, just enough to assert dominance without unnecessary slaughter. We, the observers, the conquerors of many systems, realized we were witnessing something far more terrifying than raw power: perfect control. Fear began to bloom in the ranks of every alien species in orbit. Some recoiled, others hesitated. The humans' calm was maddening, almost obscene. They did not panic. They did not scream. Even as our scouts reported annihilation and chaos in their fleets, the humans adjusted, adapted, and flowed around every strike as if guided by a single, unseen consciousness. And yet, for all their precision, there was an almost playful arrogance. It was not cruelty, it was strategy. They had anticipated our fear before we even recognized it. Our panic, our attempts to overreact, became part of their calculation. Every tremor in our forces, every alarm sounded in vain, was a thread in the tapestry of preparation we could not yet see. As the first orbital bombardments began to escalate, a deep resonating dread spread across the galaxy. Questions that had once seemed rhetorical. Could humans survive interstellar conflict? Could they possibly outthink us? Began to solidify into a terrifying reality. And at that moment I understood we were not witnessing a war. We were witnessing something far stranger, a test, a display, a training exercise that would shake the cosmos to its very foundations. From the deck of my vessel, I watched a small fleet of human ships pivot through the void, almost dancing between our larger cruisers, dodging antimatter charges with a grace that defied probability. Every move suggested foresight. Every hesitation in our assault, every faltering drone, became an opportunity they had foreseen. And then, in the eerie silence between volleys, a single human command signal flared across the void, a calm, deliberate wave of coordination that instantly reorganized their forces. They were everywhere, and yet nowhere. I realized with a growing sense of horror and awe that our preconceived notions of superiority had been shattered in an instant. What looked like chaos from afar was the precise pattern of a species who had already mastered the rules we did not yet understand. And then the first human salvo struck a capital ship head-on, dismantling it with such efficiency that even the most battle-hardened alien admirals could not comprehend the method behind it. Silence followed. An unnatural, oppressive stillness. It was as if the universe itself paused to acknowledge the emergence of a predator no one had anticipated. We had come to judge, to conquer, to teach them the futility of resistance. But in that instant, the reality became horrifyingly clear. Humanity was not merely surviving, they were orchestrating the conflict on a scale we could not yet measure. And as the debris of our destroyed fleet drifted silently into the void, I knew the true question was no longer could humans defend themselves. It was, what had they become while we slept? A shadow moved in the distance, a human vessel pivoting with impossible precision toward an approaching alien cruiser. And in that moment we understood. The war we thought we had declared was already lost. And as the humans repositioned, flowing like liquid across the battlefield, I could only wonder, if this was only the opening skirmish, what horrors and revelations awaited us in the chapters yet to come. The void grew tense, a silent theater of anticipation. From my observation deck, I saw the humans, still small, still seemingly fragile, deploying something that defied comprehension. Holographic projections bloomed across space, ghostly sigils of light twisting and folding into impossible geometries. They shimmered, then collapsed, only to reform elsewhere, flitting between human ships as though taunting us. It was a language, but not one we had encountered before, a cipher of light and motion that conveyed intention without words, a ballet of strategy visible only to those who dared to interpret it. Our analysts strained to decode the signals. We, who had mapped countless civilizations' battle strategies, had assumed superiority would come through brute force. Yet here the humans wielded confusion as a weapon. Every projection, every sudden shift in their formations was designed to provoke, mislead, and manipulate. The most basic assumption we made, that a species fought for survival in predictable ways, crumbled before our eyes. From the streets of one human city, we glimpsed the subtlety behind the spectacle. Civilians, not soldiers, moved among observation towers and communication hubs. A child stared at a display screen, fingers tracing patterns in the holographic mist. A scientist adjusted a signal modulation that made an alien destroyer veer off course. Every human action, no matter how insignificant it seemed, was a thread in a web we could barely perceive. Fear was not their enemy, it was their tool. They observed us as we observed them, anticipating instinctive reactions, exploiting hesitation, shaping our perception of chaos into a predictable outcome. And yet, for all their cunning, there was a terrifying grace to it. We noted one fleet commander hesitating, uncertain as a human projection flickered across the void, suggesting an assault from a vector that did not exist. They predicted not only our movements but our thought patterns, the blind spots in our intelligence algorithms, the unconscious panic that rippled through our ranks. A single human could create a cascade of miscalculations across 1,000 ships without leaving their station. Shock rippled through our observers. Across the galaxy, we had expected resistance. We had expected fear. We had not expected elegance, not the kind of elegance born of art or beauty, but the elegance of a predator who understood the rules of engagement in a way no other species had ever achieved. What we mistook for playfulness was mastery. What we assumed was instinct was calculation. What we believed to be luck was centuries of preparation distilled into flawless execution. Through a civilian lens, it became clear humans were not merely fighting, they were training us, maneuvering us like pieces on a board and learning from our reactions in real time. We were the unwitting opponents in a game we did not yet know we were playing, and the humans seemed to enjoy it. Their calm laughter, heard only faintly on intercepted transmissions, resonating like a heartbeat in the void. A sudden flash of light marked the destruction of one of our capital cruisers. It was precise, surgical, and almost playful. The humans had not overpowered it with brute strength. They had exploited the smallest inefficiency, the tiniest hesitation in our patterns. That single loss caused a chain reaction. Our formations wavered, our drones misaligned, our projections faltered. And all the while, the holographic signals continued to pulse, shifting, teasing, teaching. I realized then a terrifying truth. Perception shapes reality. We thought we were observing and controlling. In fact, we were being observed, nudged, and manipulated. Every fear we felt, Every calculation we made had already been anticipated and accounted for in the human's cryptic, glowing web of strategy. The battlefield was a mirror, reflecting our assumptions back at us and exposing every flaw. And yet, there was an undercurrent of admiration even in our dread. We could not deny their brilliance, their ingenuity. They turned war into a game, a test not of strength but of intellect and cunning. To survive, we would have to think like them, act like them, anticipate like them. But we were not yet capable. Then, in a sudden pivot, the human fleet vanished from our sensors for an instant, a phantom sweep across the void. When they reappeared, it was in a formation that had no apparent logic, yet every ship occupied a position that neutralized multiple threats at once. Our fleets reeled. Confusion became panic, and through it all, the human signals shimmered, folding and collapsing, a mocking reminder that the game had only just begun. And as the first human maneuver erased a week's worth of our tactical calculations in seconds, I realized the next question was not if they would win, but how deeply they had already infiltrated our minds and shattered our assumptions. The first contact had been made, but the war, and the true mastery of these humans, was only beginning. The human calm was no accident. It was not instinct, nor luck, nor the mercy of the cosmos. It was preparation. A preparation that had spanned decades, layered upon decades, hidden from the prying eyes of the galaxy. From our vantage, the evidence was subtle. Brief glimpses of holographic training arenas, fleeting recordings of simulations far more advanced than anything we had imagined. Yet the magnitude of it only became clear when the humans themselves began to move. The flashback unfolded like a tapestry. Children barely old enough to crawl moved through VR simulations that mimicked entire galaxies. They learned to anticipate alien tactics before the aliens themselves had conceived them. Each soldier was trained in an endless cycle of scenarios, war games that spanned continents and centuries compressed into seconds of neural adaptation. Reflexes were enhanced with AI interfaces that projected hundreds of possible outcomes in microseconds, allowing the human body to react before thought could even form. Genetic augmentation whispered its presence in every graceful movement, every strike that seemed impossible. Cybernetic enhancements amplified the tiniest twitch of a finger, the faintest shift in weight, the subtlest flicker of the eye. Every human we observed on the battlefield had been tempered like steel in a forge of unrelenting challenge. What the galaxy assumed was vulnerability, flesh, bone, and blood, was in reality a crucible of unthinkable strength. And yet they called it training, not war, not conquest, training. Every mission, every exercise, every simulation was framed as preparation for a universe they knew would one day challenge them. The very attacks we had launched, intended to terrorize and subdue, had been anticipated, integrated, and converted into acceleration for their evolution. Our weapons became teachers, our strategies the curriculum. Every strike, every ambush, every assault refined them further, sharpening reflexes and intuition to levels that defied reason. We, the alien observers, began to understand the magnitude of what we were witnessing. Fear and admiration intertwined. This was not mere survival. This was the deliberate cultivation of a species capable of rewriting the rules of engagement itself. Pride radiated from their civilization. Not arrogance, not hubris, but a quiet, almost imperceptible confidence forged from relentless preparation. And in that pride, there was danger beyond imagining, the quiet assurance that no challenge could catch them unready. From our analysis decks, we noted civilians participating in exercises that blurred the line between play and war. Adolescents ran simulations that tested ethics and strategy simultaneously, forcing rapid adaptation under conditions designed to fracture lesser minds. Soldiers trained in synchronized combat, anticipating multiple alien species strategies at once. Every human, regardless of role, was part of the ongoing evolution, an organism constantly reshaped to thrive under pressure. And yet, for all the preparation, there was unpredictability. Their training did not create automata. It created beings capable of improvisation, of thinking in ways that defied logic. Every attack we launched, intended to exploit a perceived weakness, was turned into an opportunity. Every failure became data, every near-death experience a lesson. Their evolution was symbiotic with conflict itself, a continuous refinement honed on the whetstone of interstellar danger. I began to see the battlefield differently. Where once I perceived humans as small, fragile, inconsequential, I now saw a force tempered by time, refined by foresight, and elevated by struggle. And yet the galaxy still underestimated them, even as we bore witness to a species that had learned to treat war itself as the ultimate training ground. Then came the first hint of a twist we could not have anticipated. A single unit, a human mech barely larger than a vehicle, executing a maneuver so complex that our calculations failed to keep pace. It responded instantly to 3 separate threats simultaneously, predicting the trajectory of incoming fire before it was even launched. The result was not just survival, it was evolution accelerated. A species transforming mid-battle into something beyond what any of us could anticipate. And in that moment, the truth became terrifyingly clear. Humans had turned preparation into power. Raw strength alone could not match foresight, training, and adaptability. Every strike we had intended to cripple them had only sharpened their edge, and every battle they survived elevated their mastery over themselves, and over us. And as the humans paused between assaults, seemingly calm yet brimming with unseen energy, I realized the next revelation awaited not in the battlefield itself, but in how they manipulated us. How they turned fear into predictability, strategy into an art form we had barely begun to comprehend. The true test was only beginning. The reports began as anomalies, fragments of data streaming from the outermost patrols. A cruiser missing, a transport shattered without warning. At first, the intelligence networks assumed errors, sensor glitches, miscalculations, the chaos of war. But soon pattern emerged. Defeat after defeat, each more inexplicable than the last. The humans were not merely surviving our attacks. They were rewriting the battlefield with each encounter, bending it to their will, using a combination of cunning and audacity that defied reason. From my vantage point, I observed their methods with a mixture of horror and fascination. Guerrilla tactics stretched across light years, fleets splitting and rejoining in unpredictable formations, small strike teams appearing behind our lines and disappearing into the void as if the laws of physics bent to their whim, and always misdirection. One fleet would advance, drawing our forces into a trap. Another would seemingly retreat, only to reappear in a sector we considered secure. Every movement was deliberate, every hesitation calculated. We were learning, too slowly, that human warfare was not linear. It was psychological, a dance of anticipation and provocation. On the surface, civilians moved with quiet purpose, unseen from the orbital battlefields. In one observation hub, I witnessed a child calibrating a drone's trajectory, while an elderly technician adjusted communications arrays that subtly interfered with alien targeting systems. From hidden vantage points, humanity orchestrated attacks that appeared spontaneous, yet each strike was part of a broader, unseen symphony. It was as though the entire species had been trained not only to survive, but to manipulate the perception of the enemy itself. Fear, confusion, pride, they all became tools, invisible threads pulled across the fabric of our fleets. Alien commanders reported bewilderment. What had been assumed as strength, numbers, and superior firepower crumbled before coordination we could not anticipate. Entire squadrons faltered at the sight of human maneuvers that seemed impossible, their sensors and logic disrupted by the precision of deception. Human ships appeared where they should not exist, vanished where they should have been, and re-emerged in formations that neutralized entire flotillas. And always the civilians were there too, silent, observing, guiding, feeding the battlefield with imperceptible cues that subtly controlled the outcome. The most shocking moments were not the victories themselves, but the calm with which humans achieved them. A squadron of alien fighters would rush an asteroid field, confident in their overwhelming advantage, only to encounter a series of ambushes perfectly timed and positioned. Explosions flared, ship after ship crippled, yet the humans seemed detached, almost serene. Their movements were fluid, natural, as if they had rehearsed the exact panic in our ranks, the precise way our ships would respond to sudden threats. Each defeat was a lesson learned by the humans and a psychological blow to us. From orbiting command centers, I saw the ripple effects. Communications went haywire. Fleets hesitated. Tactical networks designed to respond in milliseconds lagged, frozen by unpredictability. And in the midst of this, a new fear began to emerge among our soldiers. Fear not of their strength, but of their foresight. The humans anticipated, adapted, and executed with uncanny accuracy. What was more terrifying than any weapon in their arsenal was the clarity with which they seemed to see the battlefield, our strategies, our expectations, our instincts, before we even acted. Reports came from multiple theaters at once. Sectors thought secure were overrun. Supply lines rerouted, ambushes foiled before they began. The humans did not attack randomly. They attacked precisely, and when they did, it was coordinated at a level that suggested omniscience. Small detachments, civilians included, leveraged terrain, orbital anomalies, and even the predictable behaviors of alien minds. It was a war of intellect, a contest in which physical superiority mattered little compared to the ability to predict and manipulate. And yet, despite the chaos they sowed, the humans retained restraint. No unnecessary destruction. Every strike had purpose, every ambush a lesson embedded in the experience of their opponents. Alien forces reeled, unsure whether they faced a battle, a trap, or a lesson in strategy. One commander whispered over the comms, disbelief tinged with fear. "They do not fight for victory, they fight to teach themselves." In the shadows, civilians watched the unfolding carnage with the same serenity as the soldiers. Children and elders alike contributed to the unseen orchestration of the battlefield. Their presence was invisible to us, yet integral to the precision of every maneuver. We realized, with a growing sense of horror, that humanity itself was a network, a single organism operating across scales and distances we had not comprehended. The battlefield was not merely where they fought, it was where they lived, learned, and perfected themselves. And then came the crescendo. A coordinated counterattack across 3 sectors simultaneously, striking before our fleets could even align. Alien forces faltered, retreating in confusion. Our intelligence network struggled to map the human maneuvers, but every attempt to anticipate them was met with failure. It was as if the humans had become the environment itself, unpredictable, omnipresent, yet coherent. And in their wake, a new term began circulating among our species, unthinkable. Even as awe settled over the remaining alien forces, there was terror too. We were beginning to grasp the scale of what we faced. This was not brute strength, not overwhelming numbers. It was adaptability. It was intellect. It was the ability to bend the battlefield to one's will while remaining calm and deliberate. And the civilians, hidden in plain sight, ensured that the humans' advantage would continue to grow with every encounter. And as the last of our capital ships retreated in disarray, I realized the next revelation would strike at the very core of our assumptions. The humans did not merely react, they controlled the flow of battle itself, shaping the perceptions, expectations, and fears of every alien who dared to face them. The true power of humanity was only beginning to reveal itself. The truth hit like a supernova, sudden and undeniable. This war was not what we had believed it to be. The humans had not been caught unprepared. They had orchestrated the entire conflict. What we had assumed to be reactionary defense, a desperate struggle for survival, was in reality a calculated exercise. They had engineered the war itself, summoning the galaxy's apex predators to measure themselves against the best the universe could offer. Every strike we launched, every ambush we plotted, every tactical superiority we assumed was anticipated, calculated, and transformed into their own training. From my observation deck, I could see it unfold with clarity that bordered on disbelief. Small fleets, seemingly insignificant in mass, moved like parts of a living organism. One vessel would dart into a formation, drawing fire just enough to reveal weaknesses, then retreat, its pilot understanding that even a minor sacrifice could shape the outcome of entire campaigns. Another human command, barely a voice in the vast network of communication, would issue an adjustment so subtle that it would pass unnoticed by most observers. Yet it rerouted fleets, synchronized defenses, and ensured victory without a single massive engagement. Strength, we realized, was not the measure of humanity's advantage. Physical superiority, the size of ships, the potency of weapons, the power of fleets, mattered little compared to the orchestration of knowledge, preparation, and unity. Humans had distilled war into an art form, transforming chaos into a canvas on which strategy and instinct danced together in perfect harmony. Each soldier, civilian and pilot, was not just a participant, they were a node in a vast, adaptive intelligence that could respond, improvise, and outthink any predator the galaxy could muster. The philosophical weight of it settled upon us. We had assumed that dominance could be won by overwhelming force, by annihilating the weak before they could organize. The humans had shown us another truth. Foresight, preparation, and cohesion could turn the underdog into a predator that no one could predict. Each decision, however minor, carried profound consequences. A single pilot choosing to delay a maneuver by a fraction of a second could collapse an ambush, reroute an entire battle, and change the tide of a sector. These choices, seemingly insignificant to the outside observer, were amplified by training, anticipation, and unity into outcomes of cosmic consequence. From a civilian perspective, the scale of coordination was staggering. Children adjusting sensor calibrations in VR simulations influenced fleet maneuvers light years away. Scientists, engineers, and even artists contributed subtle cues that shaped strategy, manipulating alien perception to ensure that every opponent's reaction fed into a larger plan. Fear became predictable, hesitation exploitable, and overconfidence a weapon in the human's hands. What we had assumed were random victories were in fact meticulous, interconnected events, each designed to refine their tactics and reinforce their dominance. And yet there was elegance in the way they conducted it. Violence was never indiscriminate. Destruction was measured, precise, almost poetic. The humans seemed to operate with a philosophy that combined intellect and ethics, proving that power could be exercised with restraint, that mastery did not require cruelty. Their actions inspired awe, even among the defeated and terrified. We realized that the apex predator need not be the strongest. It was the one who understood the rules of survival and reshaped them in ways no one else could imagine. Then came the moment that crystallized the humans' advantage. A single decision by a lone human commander altered the course of an entire battle. A detachment, poised to engage in a direct confrontation with our forces, waited, hesitated, then executed a maneuver no one had predicted. One choice, a pivot, a timing adjustment, a command barely audible in the communication network, disrupted the equilibrium of our assault, leaving entire squadrons exposed and forcing our leaders to retreat. We had been confident in our strategy, in the overwhelming superiority of force. Yet a fraction of a second, a choice invisible to most, had undone our assumptions entirely. The ripple effects were instantaneous. Our formations staggered. Communication loops failed as predictions collapsed. Morale faltered under the weight of incomprehensible efficiency. Humans, small and fragile by conventional measures, had transformed the battlefield into a theater of intellect, anticipation, and adaptation. Each strike, each retreat, each minor adjustment contributed to a larger, unified outcome that no single alien mind could fully grasp. We began to comprehend that the war itself was secondary to the humans' true goal. They were testing themselves against the universe, using every challenge, every enemy, every miscalculation on our part to refine their abilities. This was evolution accelerated, not by nature but by conscious design. The humans were not merely surviving. They were deliberately shaping themselves into a species capable of outthinking, outmaneuvering, and ultimately surpassing every threat that dared approach them. The awe we felt was mingled with fear. A predator that could anticipate every move, manipulate perception, and exploit hesitation on a cosmic scale was no longer a hypothetical danger, it was reality. And yet admiration tempered our terror. We recognized the depth of their ingenuity, the courage required to risk everything for an advantage no one else understood. They had turned the chaos of war into a proving ground for mastery, and in doing so, reshaped the rules of engagement for the galaxy itself. And as the humans paused, seemingly calm amid the chaos of battle, their unity and foresight radiated like an unbroken current across space. We, the observers, realized with a mixture of awe and dread that the next question was no longer whether humans could survive. They had already redefined the concept of survival itself. And yet, for all their preparation and cunning, the galaxy had not seen the full extent of their power. As alien fleets faltered and our calculations failed, one question hung in the void. What ultimate revelation awaited us when humans revealed not just how to survive, but how to dominate the very game of war itself? The battlefield, from our distant observation, had become a stage not only of combat, but of revelation. The humans, the small, fragile species we once underestimated, were no longer abstract entities moving in formations or blinking on sensors. They were living, breathing beings with stories, fears, and motivations that radiated through the chaos. Invisible threads connecting soldiers to civilians, pilots to engineers, and children to their elders. From the edges of the combat zones, I observed moments that defied the detached logic of war. A human soldier crouched behind the shattered remains of what had once been a transport vessel. Blood-stained yet focused. In a brief, stolen pause, he spoke softly into a recorder, not for command or strategy, but for posterity, his voice trembling, revealing vulnerability. I fight not because I must, but because I cannot allow fear to dictate the future of those who cannot fight for themselves. Even in the midst of destruction, there was reflection, conscience, and a quiet sense of duty that no calculation could replicate. Elsewhere, a squad of young pilots discussed strategy while sharing personal stories. One recounted the loss of a sibling in a prior skirmish. Another spoke of a mentor lost to the void of space. Yet even amid grief, they trained, adapted, and deployed with precision that made our fleets falter. Their humanity was not a weakness, it was the engine of resilience. We began to understand that the courage of humans was bound not to instinct alone, but to conscience, empathy, and the commitment to something larger than themselves. Civilians, too, became integral to the war effort, their subtle contributions shaping outcomes in ways our species had never imagined. Children monitoring sensor arrays, scientists adjusting communication relays, engineers guiding drone maneuvers, each acted with purpose, turning the battlefield into a living network of calculated intuition. From our distant vantage, it appeared almost supernatural, yet it was simple human ingenuity channeled into coordinated ethical action. Alien commanders began to report a mixture of respect and fear. Our scouts whispered of encounters with humans where violence was measured and precise, yet restraint was maintained. Civilians and soldiers alike demonstrated that power was not the mere capacity to destroy, but the discipline to choose when and where to apply it. What was most terrifying to our kind was that this restraint amplified the humans' advantage. They were unpredictable not because they were chaotic, but because they were morally and strategically sophisticated in ways we could barely comprehend. I witnessed a scene on a battlefield orbiting a shattered moon. A human medic, against all odds, rushed to save an injured comrade amid active fire. She moved not with the reckless desperation of a cornered species, but with the calm assurance of one who had calculated every risk and outcome. In doing so, she preserved not just a life, but a critical node in the coordinated human network. That single act reverberated across the battlefield, influencing squad movements and decisions in ways imperceptible to the alien eye, yet decisive in the larger strategy. Stories flowed through intercepted transmissions, families sending encouragement to soldiers light years away, letters filled with hope and counsel, recorded messages that would teach future generations. Humans fought for survival, yes, but also for connection, for principles, for something beyond mere victory. Their morality intertwined with their tactics, creating a species that could both destroy and protect, that could wield terror with precision while preserving the ethical core that bound them together. Even the alien ranks began to shift under this realization. We had expected fear to dominate the humans' reactions, yet instead, their courage inspired hesitation in our forces. Respect mingled with dread as we acknowledged that this species did not fight alone. They fought as one, as individuals contributing to a living, adaptive organism. And with every coordinated strike, every civilian intervention, every quiet act of bravery, the humans taught a lesson we had not anticipated. Strength without conscience is brittle, but intelligence, unity, and moral courage are indestructible. In one fleeting moment, I observed a child activating a defensive matrix remotely, saving dozens of soldiers from a trap we had carefully laid. The aliens who witnessed it murmured incredulously, "How could a single vulnerable human influence the outcome of battles across entire sectors?" Yet it was precisely this unity, this interconnectedness that defined the edge humanity wielded. It was not brute force nor technology alone, but the combination of intellect, empathy, and purpose that made them unstoppable. And in those hours of observation, the galaxy began to shift its understanding. What we had assumed was chaos was deliberate, what we thought was fragility was strength, and what we had underestimated, the human spirit, revealed itself as the ultimate weapon. Fear and respect intertwined in every report, in every transmission, in every calculation that faltered under the weight of comprehension. The humans were not merely participants in war, they were teachers, philosophers, and warriors all at once, reminding us that survival was inseparable from courage, ethics, and ingenuity. And as the humans paused, regrouping under the quiet light of distant stars, we, the alien observers, realized with mounting dread that the final revelation had yet to unfold. The true power of humanity was not in fleets or firepower, but in their unity, resilience, and the moral compass that guided every calculated decision. What awaited us in the next stage would challenge everything we thought we knew about strength, strategy, and the fate of the galaxy itself.